Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air. Today I am joined by Chris Duddridge, VP of Sales EMEA for Soroco, somebody that I've known for a couple of years now and is well thought of as an inspiring sales leader in the tech world. Chris, firstly, thank you for joining us today. How's things? You all well?
Getting there, Owen. Yeah, all good. Thanks very much.
Getting there. Well, look, thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking about some of your experiences in building out sales team from the ground up, what works well, how to develop a sense of belonging and ownership within the team, and how you motivate and keep people driven as that team grows out. And a lot of that will fall under the notion of empowering people as well. I'm really looking forward to learning from your experiences. Before we get into that topic though, perhaps you can just give us 2 minutes. Who's Chris? Who's Soroco? Just give us some background.
Thank you, Owen. So Chris Duddridge, VP of Sales EMEA for Soroco. Who's Chris? So I live down on the south coast, just outside of Brighton. I've pretty much spent my entire life travelling into London. So the last couple of years have felt very strange being completely home-based. So my background is that I am now at Soroco, which is a process discovery company. I was a former VP of Sales, MD for the UK and Ireland for UiPath. Prior to that, I was working in the world of ERP for a company called Deltec. I suppose my career started by having a real job once upon a time where I worked in finance and accounting. So I think moving into the enterprise software world, actually having worked in a role that used a lot of those technologies stood me in good stead over time. But I suppose it would go some 4 years back where I kind of moved into the world of RPA that really opened my mind to kind of new technologies and how they were driving and powering enterprises forward at the fastest rate of knots that they'd ever experienced. And I haven't really looked back. My major passion really is in business transformation. So whether that be through technology or whether it be through partnering with organizations, companies or implementation partners to go and deliver huge transformation. And I've been very proud to be part of delivery projects with customers that have either been $100 million cost out removals for customers, starting their journey and implementing new technology, but really anything that is new, sexy, and a big buzzword in the market at the moment is my passion. So I mean that's probably enough about me.
Fantastic. Thank you for the background. I know that you have a strong set of beliefs around sales and how you build out sales teams. And I know that you've said to me in the past, and even before we hit record today, around any person or any good salesman can move from industry to industry, sector to sector, if they get the right development, the right environment, the right training, the right leadership. You've obviously done that a few times now. Maybe you can just give us some context around your experience in building out teams. Where did you start? Where did you get it to? Just a bit of context for the audience to understand the journey.
Yeah, I suppose the foundation in sort of building out teams was a really fortunate role I had and a great leader that I was working for at Deltec. I'll name drop him, Fergus Gilmore. I came in as the first person on the ground there. To sort of launch and deliver a product that was traditionally a very old on-premise ERP technology, and they were just making their first forays into deploying that in the cloud. But they had limited or no sort of sales experience of new business, and coming from my background at new business at Sage, I came in as an individual contributor with no team, but always with a plan to try and build out that sort of sales motion. It was a little bit slower at that time. It wasn't the experiences I've had in the last sort of 3 years where it was hiring 50 people in 6 months, but actually it was proving the value of the products to the customers and then building the market, building the pipeline, and doing all of the things from SDR right up to negotiating contracts. And of course, by doing that and building the momentum, it gave me the ability to build headcount. And because I was doing that from a ground up perspective, it gave me a lovely, luxurious time to go out and really look for the right type of character to fit into not only the business, but also the industry and the product that we were selling. But it taught me a lot about actually, there's a hell of a lot of people in the market from a very diverse background and very diverse levels of experience. But you you have different challenges with different personalities. And so going out and looking for extreme experience in that sector may bring with it somebody that's been doing it for a long time, but has lost the behaviors around intensive prospecting and sales methodologies that would help them build their own pipeline. Stopping short of saying they're waiting for a SDR or an inside sales team or marketing to give them a lead. That's potentially what I'm saying. So at Deltec, I managed to sort of build out a team with my MD that focused on conquering the UK and Ireland in our market sectors, and then seeing a much broader market beyond our shores. And so I started to look at a very data-led way of growing the team, not only in the UK and Ireland, but also with local representatives in other areas of Northern Europe and actually even out as far as building a team in the Middle East. But what I learned over that time with very slow incremental build of that team is that you can't have everything. You can't go out to the market to hire and say, I want someone of this cost profile with the most experience you could possibly imagine, and I want them to hit the ground running with little or no support. I think we used to call that being a self-starter. But I think what it taught me is that you have to be very adaptable as a manager, sales leader, in terms of the needs of the team for development. And so I spent, I suppose, the largest amount of my time in the 7 years at Deltec really doubling down on individuals' personal needs. So there was many of the people in that team who needed to know from the ground up how to best engage new prospects, structure their phone calls, write messaging and talk tracks that resonate, and ensure that we wow people during the sales cycle in presentations. And then there was others that I didn't need to help with that. They had that nailed, but they may have needed help with understanding how to take a good conversation into something that became something that could be closed. And so a lot of the time there, you were helping people understand a lot of good conversations have to come to an event where we ask someone for their business. And then the challenge for them may have been understanding paperwork, legals, negotiation tactics, and fundamentally, everything through to delivery. But it means that you have to adapt as a leader, not to just sit behind your spreadsheets and say, hey, why are you struggling? And if those things are things that you don't have in your own kit bag as a leader to coach someone on, then you have a problem. And you can either, address that with great sales enablement, great sales training, or using third parties. But I think actually the bit that taught me during my time of ramping up to then becoming the director of ERP sales across Europe was that actually I was able to influence and support and coach everyone in a very different way. Stepping into the world of UiPath and then latest with Soroco, the same is true. But actually, if you don't have that bedrock of understanding every individual's needs and how you can either get the right support for them or give the right support to them, actually sets you up to find yourself regressing back into a spreadsheet manager and needing others to fix the problems that your teams may just need some very simple support.
Chris, it strikes me that the skill that you're sort of summarizing here around leadership is something that's quite hard to teach somebody that doesn't have it. Do you think that's something that's just in somebody as a human and as a personality? Is it something that as a leader you can develop and get better at over time? And is it something that you can coach a leader that maybe doesn't have that skill nailed yet into getting better at?
Yeah, I think you can. I think anyone can be taught to do anything, frankly, unless they, to try not to use buzzwords, unless they don't have a growth mindset or or if they do have a fixed mindset. But I think it comes back to knowing that it does also take every type. But what I'm not trying to say is, with me being, I suppose, a bit more of a hippie in terms of kind of modern sales techniques, I think there's also some amazing managers who don't do everything for people, who actually force people to kind of learn themselves, and actually, it brings that adage of hire smarter people than yourself. And I'll maybe give you an example. Just this week, I've seen one of my team, step up and lead a program which is not really their responsibility. It won't affect anything that they're directly measured on, but it showed unbelievable leadership skills. And and they had their own initiative to do that. They felt it was right. They asked for permission, but they didn't need to, and they went and delivered something which had a huge value to me. But it showed that they were understanding the culture and the coaching and the development that we need to do at every level of the business.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question directly, everyone from every level of the business can be taught to do things that accelerate either themselves or others. I just particularly care about the latter, accelerating the performance and support of others. And I say there are still a group of I suppose less modern sales leaders that exist in the market that don't know how to coach any end of that spectrum. They just simply are there to report up progress and push down challenge.
Yeah, interesting. Look at, like you said, spreadsheet managers, all that sort of stuff. And can we talk? We talked about the notion of creating a sense of belonging and creating ownership within the team. I think you've touched on a good example there, where you've got somebody who this isn't within their normal responsibilities. Sounds like they've gone and owned a project, and they've got an environment where they're safe to do that, where you allow people to go and do that, and perhaps even encourage it. What are some of the other things that you've seen work where you bring people from that maybe employee mentality into a sense of ownership and part of the company and having an impact, so that they have that sense of belonging that you might not in a normal job?
Yeah, and there's so many ways that I could give you some examples of that, but again, they're normally quite fresh in your mind. So coming into an organisation, as I have done recently, that was already maturing and still very early stage, you inherit a team, and you also inherit the behaviours of your predecessor. And even in a business that you're founding and starting, you're building the culture that you want to be maintained. But many times when you go into each of those environments, either something you're building or something you've inherited, you'll find that there are people that have lacked empowerment or lack understanding of where they can meander and where they can have a bit of a wander to find their happy medium. And I don't think there's an exact science to that, but it all comes through trust ultimately, and that's two-way trust. It's trust that the people are going to do what you expect them to do, and equally trust that if you do something, you're not going to get shot down if it wasn't quite the right expectation. And I've always been really fortunate to have amazing sales leaders around me, and sales leaders managing me who've sort of given me that sort of freedom to meander, and it's worked well for me. But actually, I've made sure that that's something that I've done for my people as well, because there is no exact science to sales. There's a lot of guidance, and there's a lot of things that you can take on that will help accelerate your chances of success. But if you don't give the freedom to people to feel empowered to go and experiment, to feel empowered to go and say, hey, I know Chris said this, but I think I've got something that's even better than that on top of the bedrock that's been set up, that nothing makes me happier than to see what I've done being done better, because I'm by no means a perfect example, but it's just creating that culture, that environment for people to flourish and go off and try different things, that I think makes a big difference to the feeling of ownership of tasks. And sorry, there's another way to look at it as well, is ownership is also often linked to goals. So often people can get very goal blind. I've got this goal over here, so I'm just going to follow this one track. And I think as a good coach, not just in sales, in any industry, if somebody's got a goal and they are woefully far off course towards that, you've got to be able to ask the questions about what's not working. And I spent a lot of time, in my former business, where I managed multiple different lines of business, not just sales, or even in dotted line. And the amount of times I asked them to draw up on the board what they would stop doing, what they would do more of, what they would do less of, when they got completely goal blind, actually was a method that is so obvious, but actually it was the one that really helped clear the path to people to go and achieve what they needed to achieve, and own own the objective and own the fix that they needed to make as well. So I think that's another way of looking at it.
I like that. I love that phrase, goal blind, and I love that exercise as well. So simple, but I can imagine very, very effective as well. So a good takeaway for the audience. Chris, you're clearly very people-centric. I can tell that the way you talk, and I've known you a little while, you're very focused on the connection with people, and the fact that we've chosen this topic today kind of adheres to that. But I'm guessing there are some other things that you have had in your toolkit, but also that you've seen other leaders have outside of just connection with people. So whether that's, you know, things like what you've talked about there, that process, systems, tools, technology that underpin those people-centric skills that have helped you through that sort of scaling a sales team. Is there anything on that front that you'd say to people?
It's not, you know, I think you do either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And you know, I would say that something again that that one of my former managers did is he enlightened me to DISC profiles, like personality profiles. They're called other things based on different analysis tools, but the one I'm most familiar with is DISC, and it taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me a lot about how to interpret other people. But I'll tell you for certain that you know, we did it as a team because it helped us understand, you know, who we're best aligned to internally, but equally externally. And so from a business perspective, DISC profiling was amazing. Because, you know, it helped you understand that if you were putting a really fluffy, nice, kind, gentle, you know, would cry themselves to sleep, you know, if someone didn't like them, person in front of the CFO, who literally was zero nonsense, John Smith's, you know, then there probably would be a collide, and they had to adapt to survive, or they had to, or we had to think of someone else to put in that CFO, or give them support. You know, and my profile came back as something that was, it's called ID. So you know, high Ds would be your dominant CFO, CEO, people that just, you know, don't take shit and just want stuff done quick, and aren't bothered about the softer things around it. And obviously hard I is would cry themselves to sleep if people didn't like them. So I sit right in the middle. And so it's allowed me to balance my skills of understanding people and emotions and needs and all those great things, but also getting stuff done. But I would say that I don't think like that. I don't sit there charting out Owen Richards, you know, hard I, little bit of D, you know. But I, you know, I think a lot about you know, about how different people are different, and how you can use their differences to great avail. We talked before we came online about a recent hire I've made of somebody who is a extremely experienced, you know, sales leader into sales from outside of industry, and as far as, you know, what they were about, I spent a lot of time trying to understand what they wanted to achieve, and I knew that I could train them all of the tiny nuances and attributes of selling a technology system rather than, you know, a product or something else. But I do think about the person. When I'm hiring, I think about, can I work with them? When I'm hiring, I think, what would they be like in front of the prospects and customers that we're trying to ask for, you know, modest sums of money from to start their journeys with us? And I suppose if you think like that, and you think about the people being the most important thing, you separate all the other noise, like, is our product good enough? Is our, you know, have we got the right CRM system in place? Do we need more tools? Forget that. They're the needs. It's the people that if you elevate them and support them and understand them and give them the right support and coaching, that makes it 100% a people game. And you know this, Owen, you know, your team and your people there, you know, you hire and develop people. You don't hire and develop products or hire and develop, you know, outcomes. You hire people.
Yeah, absolutely right. I had a conversation, lucky enough to interview somebody that you'll know, Rob Baxter, who's the head of rugby at Exeter Chiefs and head coach there for many years. I think director of rugby now. He's had all sorts of titles, but ultimately he's the man that's responsible for their on the field success. And we talked a lot about the peaks and troughs of motivation, because it doesn't matter how much focus you put on people, it doesn't matter how successful they are or how skilled they are. Everybody has peaks and troughs in their motivation, because they're influenced by things internally, externally, things that they can control, but also things that they can't control. What are some of the things that you do to manage people through those troughs that they inevitably have, but also to keep them steady in those highs and keep them focused on the fact that you can't take your eye off the ball and you can keep going? I'm interested in some of the techniques that you've learned, you've used, or just maybe some of the things that you think about.
I think branding anything that I do as a technique is overstating the truth. It's a happy accident if it works. I think that's a great way to think about sales, as you know, peaks and troughs. Although there's some people that you meet that you think, Christ, your career has been an unbelievable peak, and then of course there's some people that that you speak to have had repetitive troughs and they've climbed back out of it, and that does come down to resilience. How resilient that person is. Because you can't train resilience. That's an emotion that some people show, and it's, again, to try not to use too many analogies, but it's linked very closely to fight or flight. It's linked very closely to if you get knocked down, stand right back up, all of those great things. Some people don't though. Some people will, and that's probably where you analyze the things you can do to try and help people out of troughs, because frankly, with peaks, it's about making sure, let's turn it into sales analogy. If someone's riding a wave and they're smashing it, you want to put a little bit of fear in them that if they don't keep this up, that they might be in a trough. And so you can never kind of underestimate the power of continuing to do the same things to motivate and celebrate and kind of push people that are riding the wave at the top of their peak for as long as they can sustain. They'll cover your people that are in troughs, frankly. But troughs happen for a number of reasons. Nothing ever happens in sales as you want it to. Even the tap in that you think is going to be an easy client engagement, you get to speak to procurement, and of course then they tend to ruin your day in terms of what might happen. But sorry to anyone from procurement, I love you all. But in sort of the troughs, it's about coaching the behavior to help them understand how to take the incremental steps back to where they need to get to. And you touched on something which is, I think, the factor that you have to also understand, and it kind of goes back to my care for the team that I manage, is sometimes people's troughs are outside of work. In fact, most times actually, when you're speaking to someone that's down on their luck, it's not because you've given them too much work to do, because that's your job, that's what you get paid your basic salary for. But it's understanding that at home you might have a bereavement or a challenging scenario that you may not tell everyone, and understanding that really helps you understand how you can apply the right level of pressure to get somebody back to where they need to get to. And there is also the reality that if you know those things, that you can give them some kind of guidance or some release some pressure internally to give them some short-term relief, but also then kind of give them a goal of where you want them to recover to. So I know they're very vague in their sentiment, but you probably understand what I'm saying. The last thing I'd say is there are people that will hit a trough, and it's by their own doing. And it's through the attributes that I just don't accept in business, which is laziness, which is assumptiveness, which is complacency, which is all of the things that frankly, I think I've got a good gauge on people that wouldn't bring those behaviours to the table. But I've seen them many times, and I've never had to have a challenging conversation with someone about their role if they're showing the right behaviours and they're doing the right things, and it's just a case of luck. But I absolutely have no qualms in having much more serious conversations with people where they're actually not doing the right things for themselves or for the business. And that is a reality that we all as sales leaders have to admit, is there are some people that are unhelpable.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because you touched on something earlier around people. I think you used the word sales hippie or something like that, and I think there's a connotation that comes with modern sales methodologies and leadership methodologies, and maybe people that are in denial or left behind, that it might be a bit fluffy and that it's all very warm and lovely. But actually, you've touched on something there. You can't let go of the need to be decisive when you need to be decisive, and you can't let go of the need to be tough when you need to be tough, and straight when you need to be straight. And I think it's about not using those those tools or that tone unnecessarily for the sake of it, which I think is a bit of an old-fashioned way of doing things, but knowing when you need to, because without that, the soft, fluffy sales hippie becomes very empty, doesn't it? Because it's all nice and it's all fluffy, and everybody's going to need that push once every so often. Everybody's going to need to be told they need to get better at something. Everyone's going to need a bit of a charge up every so often, and it's an interesting point to touch on, that is a necessary tool you have to have and will never go away, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, still being able to kind of have more of an emotional spectrum, in my role, still unfortunately has to have the firm but fair side to it as well. I've got a very big goal, and I've had a big goal in every role that I've had, and I expect nothing less, because otherwise some of my behaviours might become a bit lazy. If it was a tap in. But I think you have to know how to balance that, because that's just about being clear. If you're clear on your expectations, hey, by here if you're there, you're great. By here if you're not, then we're going to have a challenge. You can do that in a nice way. You can do that still being a human about it. But this is the thing that I always love it when people say to me, I couldn't be in sales, and I love that. I love it when they say why. And they say, because I couldn't take the risk of not having a job if I had a bad year. I'm thinking, well, that is a very good point, because a bad year would not be accepted, but a bad period would certainly. But it's so funny, because when you talk to people that are outside of sales, that's the historic rhetoric, and that's the kind of understanding that people have outside of sales, is that they see a lot of bodies depart, and they see a lot of bodies arrive. And I know that sounds brutal in the way that you say it, but that's what's observed. And so salespeople understand that. There's no one salesperson that doesn't understand the perishability of their career and their livelihood should they not uphold their role. And that's, it's really easy to spot someone that doesn't have that. And I'll only give you a couple of examples there that come from two factors, I think. One is that they're so financially secure that actually the motivation for the next paycheck is not present. So that's why I've always liked to hire people with expensive tastes. It's a great way, especially to get that motivation. But there's also just people that are not destined for sales. And you can spot that a mile off, because it's and it comes back to people that don't like the word sales, aren't proud of what salespeople actually do. That they almost feel they're a client advisor, but they're the last bit. They are asking people for their money is a bit dirty. It's like we've had a good time, and those are two things that I think are. Go back to your point, that you have to be incredibly firm and also incredibly aware of. Because otherwise you're either carrying, if you're a founder, you're just pouring money out the door that's coming in. If you're a senior leader, a shareholder, then you're just demolishing your revenues by holding people that aren't upholding their responsibility. And lastly, even if you're not, and you're just responsible for managing a team without any of the equity concerns, you're wasting time, where you can have somebody in that role that could be doing 3 times, 4 times, 5 times as much to get you forward. And it's being able to spot that, make the right decisions for the business, and do that in a very, very conscientious way. But I've had less of that as a challenge, because I think I've always thought about the fit to the business when I've hired.
Chris, it strikes me you've got a very clear vision on what you need to be and what you want to do with your team, and the types of people that belong in your team and that maybe don't as well. I'm interested to get your input, and probably this will be our final topic for the conversation, around how much you let the people within that team shape the culture and shape the growth and the journey within that team. Because as a leader, I'm guessing we can't do it all, and it can't always be our way, because what was right in one organisation won't be next in the next right in the next team, and so on and so forth. But equally, if you let go entirely, you're out of control, and things start to look different to the way that you perhaps know from your experience is the right way or a better way of doing things. And ultimately, that's why you're hired, right? That's why you're in the seat that you're in. So give me a sense of how much freedom you would give, how much you're defining that culture, and how much you think the people within the team are influencing it.
So I would say I've joined a company during lockdown, pandemic, all of the stuff that I'm bored of even talking about now. But it's very strange. You know, I've met some of my team in London. I still haven't met one of my team members in Holland. And you know, I've met our founder, but I haven't met two of the founders. You know, my boss, I've never met him in person. You know, I'm wondering if he's 6 foot. You know, or whether he's not. You know. But actually, you know, what I've learned very quickly is that it's very hard to deliver every aspect of the culture that you want to whilst working fully remotely. And that's because you lose all of that kind of absorption benefit that you get from just being together. And I'll give you an example of that. Is like, you know, if I'm chatting away to my wife on the phone in an open office, people will hear that. You know, if I'm chatting away to my friends in an open office, people will hear that. They'll learn more about me. You know, if I'm hearing them talk to their friends, or if I'm hearing them talk to their prospects, if I'm hearing the buzz of an office, and then, you know, having 5-minute water cooler chats and all those things, you know, those are factors of the culture that are completely absent at present. So stopping short of forced fun, which I love a bit of forced fun, you're coming and you're going to enjoy it. You know, I've had to try and find a couple of opportunities in my short time at this new company to get together, to make sure we have a drink, people talk about stuff that's not work related, and just get to know each other a bit better. And it's immediate, the boost that gives, you know, in terms of the removal of that dissonance that exists, that we all have by, you know, being remote. Because obviously we met in person, you know, and probably covered a lot of ground more than you can cover in an hour, you know, but there is still a culture that you can build, and there is still a big culture that you want to build, and so I am trying to influence that. I am trying to do, you know, to empower people, to elevate their positions, to give responsibility, to say, hey, you worry about that, and let me know if there's any decisions you need to make that you think would be worthy of my review. And you know, it's that empowerment and that giving the ability for everyone's individual attributes to flourish, which gives you, you know, the examples of what I said at the top of this call. You know, with one of my team creating an initiative that is huge value to the business, and did it off his own bat. And you know, all of those things are I suppose, letting go of the trust on saying you must do this from 9 till 5 every day. This is your diary planned, and if you do that, you'll get some results, but you'll lose the connectivity to your team and to the people that sit around that. I would say that to that point, then I am hands off in terms of defining I'm hands off in terms of managing how the culture flourishes, but I'm trying to set the right tone in terms of how I am with people, how I work with people, how I communicate with people, how I communicate about people, and I do that in as visible fashion as is possible. I got asked when I first joined this current company to try and reduce the number of internal meetings, and so I've only raised that where it's something that would be engaging for people that are there. And you just have to make those small tweaks at the moment, but until we're all back in lovely sexy offices like you've got, you know, and at that point, you know, we have the ability to go and define culture 2.0 beyond the pandemic, and that is going to only be a positive if you're not, you know, if the team are engaged and happy in the world you've created for them. If that wasn't too much of a waffle-a-thon. No,
I loved it. You know, the point that I took there that I think is most poignant is around setting the tone. So not controlling the culture, letting it evolve. And I think there's two things. One is at the top you can set the tone and be the you know, the lead that people follow, and the example. And at the bottom, I think what you can do is make sure you get the recruitment right and you hire the right profile, because those two things are enough. Let it evolve naturally, because if you've got the right kind of people in there and you're making decisions if people aren't right for the culture, and if you're setting the right tone, then you've got enough of an influence that you should see the right direction at least versus the wrong direction. But I think you're right, there's a point at which you take too much control and it becomes convoluted, it becomes artificial, and then you don't get authentic connection with people and real motivation and real sort of belonging and ownership. And I think that's a really, really good point to end on. Chris, thank you ever so much. I really enjoyed listening to your experiences and your ideas, and it's very clear that you'd be a great person to work with and work for in your team. if anybody listening wants to get in touch with you to ask any questions, or maybe we can give a sense of who should be getting in touch with Soroco as well, and you know, who's the right kind of person to talk to you guys. Can you maybe just give us a sense of how people can get in touch and who should maybe?
Yeah, I'm a serial acceptor on LinkedIn. I like people, as we know, I'm just trying to boost my subscribers, and then hopefully launch my own YouTube channel. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Not so much on Twitter and whatnot. I'm on Instagram as well. Normally posting rubbish pictures of my food and the kids and dogs. So it's not really worth a follow. But my email address is christopher.duddridge@soroco.com. If anyone wants to reach out, I'm always interested in a conversation and sharing ideas with like-minded people. But yeah, that's about it from me. Soroco wise, yeah, we're an early stage company that's working with some of the world's biggest companies. We're a process discovery organization, so we're helping organizations essentially replace the kind of the unknowns about how their people are working. And we were founded by some absolute genius characters, or genies, or genies. I don't know what the right word is for it.
They should know.
Yeah, they will do. They'll be able to tell me. They've got 3 PhDs, I think maybe 4 between them. But the way in which we're helping organizations is essentially helping them understand how their people work. A lot of that is linked into understanding their processes to transform them, to look at how they can transform the experiences of their people, their customers, reduce risk and increase compliance, but ultimately help power some of the major change programs that they're all working on, which could be RPA deployment, which could be, defining the way that they're going to work beyond the pandemic. But I'd love to speak to anyone who's interested in that. I could probably fill a few hours, as you know, with my normal waffle. So, but Owen, it was a pleasure, and thank you as always. You're a great host. I need one of those Air T-shirts at some point soon.
I'll send you one. Send me your address. I'll get it to you.
Mine, you might need to go and search for the XL. Unfortunately, that
all sizes.
That child medium you've got on there is not going to.
It's shrunk in the tumble, I promise you. Chris, absolute pleasure. Thank you. I will send you an Air T-shirt and look forward to seeing your Instagram posts, eating your dinner with it as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Owen.
Thanks. Bye-bye.